Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to this regulatory meeting. We're going to open with a karakia, and Councillor Walker is going to provide that for us. Thank you.
Kia ora. Kia tau mai te matanga, kia tau mai te rangamari, kia tau mai te kaha me te araha mō tēnei kaupapa hui e tā hiki e. Let's be grounded in clarity. Let's be peaceful. Let's be strong and loving at this issue. Bind together, and so it is.
Kia ora, thank you. Do we have anybody on Zoom? Yes, we do. We've got some staff members on Zoom. Just staff on Zoom. Great. Apologies. We've got an apology from Mayor King and from Councillor Greening. If somebody's happy to move, thank you. Councillor Maru, and seconder for the apologies, Councillor Walker. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Carried. Public forum? No speakers in public forum. And any declarations of interest, please? No. And we'll move to my chair's report. Just to say that in terms of the report, I think, there's been a bit of contact with me around issues around quad bikes, and it's a sort of ongoing issue for some. I've raised two different sort of areas here, seeking some report back from staff about them, as you can see. Any questions or comments on anything raised in my report?
I just got a call from the mayor. So
I'm sure I can hold from the mayor. Councillor Mailing and then Councillor Butler.
Yeah, well, the one in the Tākega police report, I think is a real concern because it's a safety issue, and obviously people are riding vehicles and alcohol's involved. So I'd be interested to see what they resolve, because originally it was families going there and having it for a reasonably good time, but it looks like it's got out of hand. And I would hate to see somebody seriously injured or killed in that area. So I'll be very interested in the monitoring that you get and the feedback that you get in the future.
Yes, and the injuries, when we talk about serious injuries, we're talking about broken backs. So people are, the injuries that happen are really serious injuries. And each time there's a big weekend out there, there can be 200 people out there. That's extraordinary, really. And it has become out of control, and I know that some people living out there, find it fairly disturbing at times, and interesting to hear the police has raised that issue around liquor ban and looking to council to see, well, what can you do about that? So we're going to get a report back about that, about what's possible, what's not, and what the imagined impacts of the options would be. But just to say that, the injuries are pretty serious that are happening out there. And every weekend, these long weekends, good power tides, the chopper's out there almost every time. Yeah. Councillor Butler?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think the 4.2 the issue of damage, environmental damage in the Motopapa estuary is an ongoing issue, and I think that we need to be looking at all solutions that we possibly can, and it's something that other councils are grappling with around the country with environmental damage by vehicles on beaches. So yeah, I'm just looking forward to us seeing if we can come up with some solutions.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan, you're on? Yep.
Okay. So I think I emailed it, hopefully you received it, Kim, just in relation to winter grazing and stock exclusion rules, and it's quite topical in the Farmers Weekly this way, where one of the commentators has raised the issue about what the cost is likely to be to farmers for that. And Environment Canterbury, they're requiring them to require a resource consent for winter grazing. And I'm just wanting to clarify if Jane or Merkel will know, we going down the same path. And just while they're responding, I'll just find the article so I can read the relevant parts.
Sure. Who's best positioned there? Little Jane.
Kia ora. I'm Jane Stewart. I'm compliance, and I'm part of the implementation team for the Essential Freshwater Package. So the winter grazing, just a bit of background about it. These are winter grazing regulations came into effect 1st of November this year, so just a couple of weeks ago. Resource consent will be required by those farmers unable to comply with the conditions of this regulation. And that's just in the interim period until the rollout of the freshwater farm plans, which is probably going to be late 2024. So the condition referred to, which is causing difficulties, is the slope condition. And I'll just read out what that covers. So intensive winter grazing is restricted to paddocks where the slope of any land under an annual forage crop and used for winter grazing must be 10 degrees or less. So that is the condition which is causing concerns around the country. We expect probably up to 10 farms will require consent. So we haven't got a huge number that we know of. So we will be requiring a consent for this process, but we will be trying to make it as simple and cost effective as possible. The consent application package will include a winter grazing management plan template for them to fill out, and that will require detailed paddock wintering plans for each paddock that they're going to be winter grazing on. And that's very similar to what's going to be required in the freshwater farm plan module on winter grazing. So we will have further details about this probably later this month, but I guess the big picture is we're trying to encourage best practice management for winter grazing.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do, Madam Chair. The Environment Canterbury, one of the things that they want a 34-page application document, $3,500 deposit fee, and I just really think that's horrendous cost and time for farmers that really don't want to be filling in a 34-page application. So assure me we're not going down that path, please.
No, look, if those you met me, I'm Leif Pickett. I look after the regional consents. So the intensive winter grazing stuff falls on my patch as such. Look, we're trying to be as simple as possible. We've got an application form that we've developed for the farmers that they can fill in already. And we've been giving it out to people who are interested.
Can I have one, please?
Yeah, we'll get you a copy, that's fine.
I don't.
And look, we're trying to make it as simple and as straightforward as possible. The problem for us is the first consent's always a bit difficult, but we're piggybacking on stuff that's been done at Otago Regional Council. So they've done all the work, and we'll basically take their consent, tweak a little bit, possibly make it simpler. and put it out there. It certainly won't be anywhere near the costs associated with ECAN's consents. And there's no way we're going to be producing 34-page documents.
Thank you. And Jane, just if I may, Madam Chair, just in relation, so once we get to the farm plan stage, people won't have to do this application for a consent for, it'll just be covered in their farm plan, is that?
It will be.
Yeah,
So
understood.
the idea is that they've got 3 pathways here. So the first pathway is they comply with the conditions, there's no problems. Second pathway is they obtain a certified freshwater farm plan, which is obviously going to be rolled out in the future. And because we haven't got these farm plans happening yet, so in the interim, they have to have a resource consent.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I might talk to you both offline at some stage further.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you through you, Madam Chair. Just going back to your report, I'm very keen to hear back from staff around this whole thing of no damage criteria. So I hear what you're saying about the use of quad bikes and the damage that that has. We have that locally at Bagents, not so much with quad bikes, but definitely with fires, definitely with our bush being slashed, removed, trees dragged out by chains behind bikes or cars so they can get access to the beach, which is causing a big disturbance on nesting birds. Plus the material that they're burning on the beach is leaving screws and nails and debris around. This is a reoccurring event. I have spoken to staff previously, but seeing that you've noted the damage in Golden Bay, I thought we could add to the strength of that conversation. So I'm keen to hear about where our staff are at on the no damage criteria. Thanks.
Will that be, that will be, pick it up in the, and the report back would be great. Thank you. It's quite a story there, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. Anything further? I'd like to move. Oh, Councillor.
I was just going to say, I'm happy to move.
Oh, great. Thank you. And have we got a seconder? Thank you, Joe. Councillor Ellis. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. We move to our group managers report with Kim. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, I'd like to add my welcome to yours in your report to the returning councillors and the newly elected councillors. I will take as read my particular report, but I'd like to add that there have been 2 draft submissions circulated for your consideration, and they come up in the relevant parts of the report. So staff have been working on making those available. They've pulled them together over the last few days, and they're there for your consideration today. Also, I'd just like to note that staff are working on the steps involved in seeking council approval for renaming of this committee. The suggestion from the outgoing council was that we rebrand or rename the committee the Environment and Regulation Committee. So we'll be following through on steps involved in bringing that change for your approval. But regardless of what we call it, we are able to look at that. This is the committee where we're able to look at the results that we're achieving. And I guess the essence here is that strategies and plans are a means to an end. And there's a separate committee that is actually there to work through the strategy and planning framework. But those processes aren't an end to themselves. And good processes are important, but not as important as good outcomes. So there's many actors involved in promoting in the change in behaviour that we are looking for across our community to deliver the sorts of outcomes that often the plans and strategies are steering us towards. And those means to marshal our community include a rules-based approach, but also incentive-based and guidance that goes with it. So with the rebranding of the committee, we are looking to suggest to you that we confirm that this committee deals with all of those approaches across the regulatory spectrum, some of which will be rule driven and deposited in our plans and in our consents, but other approaches will be more akin to how we're progressing, for instance, the implementation of the biodiversity strategy, so that we're actually working with communities of interest to achieve the sorts of outcomes collectively and through a wider community support base. So I sense that this committee is going to become quite multifaceted and quite articulate in the way that it goes about supporting council in delivering those sorts of outcomes. When we produce my report, it's not just the Environmental Assurance Group that you heard from earlier speaking. This is an organisational report, and there's many parts of the council that are feeding into that. Hence, the idea that we are acting here as a sort of a repository for turning ideas into action and then testing whether or not those sorts of actions are delivering the sorts of results. We've already heard in a response to the chair's report today, a few situations where we're not quite seeing the behaviour on our beaches and our estuaries that one would anticipate that a no damage rule would be seeking. But to dig in behind that, to be able to identify what damage actually is, to actually catch those who are causing damage in the act of causing damage and actually take that through to a rules-based solution is very challenging. And a staff report will pick up on these things and work out and try and work with you regards what does actually mean in those sorts of planning rules. And the other thing I want to bring into the discussion up front before we refer to the content of my report is that you would have also been aware in recent days that this long-awaited reform of the Resource Management Act is now starting to progress its way through Parliament. So last year we had a little bit of an insight as to what the government was thinking about with a commentary on the exposure draft of one of the areas that are out for reform. Well, this week we've seen the two bills, the Spatial Planning Bill and the Natural Built Environment Bill, being introduced to Parliament. And now that has been referred to a select committee, and down the track we'll have the opportunity of, as a council, responding to the ideas that are coming through that pathway. So while this is the delivery arm of these sorts of arrangements, we also have the Strategy and Policy Committee, which will actually take us through the exercise of trying to figure out whether, in fact, what is being promoted is, in fact, good for this region. That committee doesn't meet until next year. And so what I've been asked to do today is just test the ground here as to which councillors would like to be involved in that process so that Barry and his team can take account of those who want to be involved in the process of assessing legislative reform and its fit for purpose, and guiding us through to the process whereby ultimately we as a council can settle on a submission that will go through to the select committee process on that. So I'm wondering, Madam Chair, if we can have initially just a show of hands so it gives Barry some sense of which of those councillors would like to be involved in the work that we are now obliged to do across the organisation. And just to close, so that's the key thing that I just wanted to test before we then go into the report.
Thank you. So I think we had indication from Councillor, or yourself, Councillor Mo, and Councillor Mayling, Councillor Butler, Dan's a no, Councillor Dowler, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Walker. Well, fantastic.
Day in and day off, do we?
No. And you could include myself. So I think, did you? No.
No.
Well, so I think everybody,
Councillor, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Ellison, Councillor.
yeah,
Dan.
that's a strong response, isn't it? And more the better? More the better, you're thinking? Or were you imagining a sort of smaller subgroup of us? It's fantastic. The interest is here, of course, and
That's right. It's great. The interest is there. So we'll work with that
And we'll develop a process over the next couple of weeks on how we can bring that information to you once we've kind of identified what the key issues are that we want to discuss with councillors and the sort of things that you may want to make decisions on.
Right, no, I'll add my name to that, Roku too. Thank you.
Yeah, so one of the things that goes with that is that no matter what the new law ends up being sometime next year, it's going to take something in the order of 10 years to transition from the current law into the new structures. But to be reassured to some degree that many of the reforms that are underway under the current RMA, such as the freshwater package, are expected to flow through. So the government has indicated that many of the things that are underway now will be picked up and provided for under the new legislation rather than face as sort of a dead end where all of a sudden we finish one approach and sort of have to start another. So you're already dealing in a real sense with the reform started to click in under this current government. And staff are, as you'll see in my report, connected to these conversations that are happening nationally through a network, quite a sophisticated network, that particularly in our regional functions, to make sure that we're able to benefit from what is, from the collective wisdom across all council structures. So we're able to bring that to the table, and certainly Barry's process will be able to capitalise on that.
Thank you. And just before we come to questions or comments, just in terms of the resolution, we're authorising you to sign 2 different submissions there that have been forwarded to us, I think, this morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Mackenzie and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you through you, Chair. Just on that point, I think I did read in Minister Parker's announcements that he talked about some test cases for the new planning approach, which were yet to be announced. Is it likely to be us, or is it something that we might want to push for or not?
Barry might be better placed to answer this, but certainly in the new approach is suggesting that Tasman will be working very closely with Nelson in its planning framework. But just who's first cab off the rank, Barry? Have you got a sense of that?
Certainly, the indication from officials at MFE is they've invited us to present through the select committee process through a submission. So if the council is interested in being first cab off the rank, then we do that through the select committee process and show our interest. I understand too from officials there's quite a bit of funding that goes with that too. So there may be some pluses and potentially some minuses with being the first cab off the rank. So once we get through the bill, then there's some of the things we'll bring back to the table for you to decide, and with some advice around that. Yeah.
If I may, so that would be would that be a leadership team decision to volunteer ourselves, or would it be a council decision? And then presumably it would have to be a joint council decision. So who makes that decision as to whether we want to get our hands on the money and push through?
Through the chair, ultimately it's council's decision, but you're dead right. The challenge will be finding a common way forward with our neighbours, since this is going to be a joint process with Nelson. That is going to be some of the challenge. Are we on the same page in terms of timing and priorities? So we'll be working through that.
Thank you. Interesting. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I've just been just thinking about Kim's comments about regulatory and environment, and I think my thoughts are that I think that we probably need to bring a little bit of caution that we're not bringing a regulatory mantle onto the environmental planning space. And just to take an example, the Tasman biodiversity strategy has been, council has undertaken that is completely non-regulatory and will stay non-regulatory. for the foreseeable future anyway. And it's in that way that we have actually brought in the private landowners who are the key players in that. So I think it's just important to just consider that for our community, we need to give some reassurance that, we're not bringing a regulatory rules-based then monitoring and then, punishment because you've done something wrong to all our activities. So that is just my caution. And I think that we perhaps need to tease this out. I'd like to see us tease this out a little bit more.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Councillor Butler. Yes, that is very much, a component of how the word regulation is interpreted. And certainly there's other ways of expressing the differentiation between our rules-based system and an incentive-based system. And things like statutory versus non-statutory is another way of saying in some cases you need a rules to back it up, as we do with our wetlands. There's a rule-based system that sits in behind that. That's part of the biodiversity picture, for instance, and that's already in play. But whereas the greater significant natural area type biodiversity is in that non-statutory assistance. And as Rob said out before, we've made some headway, but we've still got to consider how do we bring the other players into the picture, and that is a council decision and a council process. And I think the key thing here is to provide a framework that is broad enough to allow all approaches to be considered. But the other aspect here is that we've made some very strong gains, I think, into working with iwi as our partners in the space. And Article 2 very clearly assigns the obligation for iwi to maintain oversight of taonga, and most definitions of taonga includes living things. And so the ability to actually have environment as a key sort of focus for our work is in part a way of actually bringing iwi into our world in a way that they can actually see that what we're trying to achieve aligns with what they're trying to achieve. So there's an ability to bring the word environment into the committee's work, gives us a sort of a better chance to work in partnership than I think if we're simply branding ourselves as regulators. Even if we want to change the definition of regulation, it's not in itself the sort of offering that we're looking for to really give emphasis to the partnership that we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Bryant.
Madam Chair, so you're just going randomly through the manager's report. I've got a number, or was you going in it?
No, I think random's good at times, isn't it?
Yeah. So firstly at 8, essential freshwater reforms, and Murphy and Jane covered this a little bit earlier in response to my questions in the chair's report. But I just do wonder if we should be front-footing this a bit. And a couple of years ago, we went out to farmers and were proactive, and whether we should do that again with all the things that are coming towards them. Right. So we're on the front foot, not really being attacked. And similarly applies Barry's here to SRNLs and ONLs and all the things. And we could perhaps put a package together around that. So I'm just wondering if Barry or Merck or Jane have given that any thought at this stage. Obviously, we've run out of time for this year, but I'm thinking early next year, because some of the stock exclusion rules, as I understand it, will be enacted from mid next year.
Yes, so last year we had our community engagement days, which Councillor Bryant was involved with, and we had 7 around the region. So we are planning on doing that again, and that will be run in conjunction with rural support. And we're looking more at community days and including industry, relevant rural industry and businesses in with us. I think we've got our TEP engagement around about to start. So that's sort of doesn't really work alongside with what we're planning. So we will be looking to organise something for early next year when it suits the various farming sector groups.
Yeah, normally autumn's a good time, March, April, as the days are shortening and they've got most things organised. So, and because the stock exclusion rules, some of them are enforced from June, aren't they?
1st of July, the first
Yeah,
tranche of those come in.
yeah.
So
So that's why I think we need a front foot that if we could.
Yeah.
Then just in relation to the two submissions that was emailed out, that's why I've read them and I just had a number of concerns, which would probably talk to someone offline. But the mayor also wants to have a look at particularly the forestry, plantation forestry one. So if we could just wait till someone had a chat with him as well. In relation to the other one, the agricultural emissions, I think Merck has made a really good job there. I did hear Merck this morning that the leader of Groundswell saying that we really need to emphasise the loss of farms that could potentially happen. Probably not so much in this area. He was even talking about 6% of dairy farms nationally could not continue because of this, and a larger percentage of sheep and beef. And obviously we're small players nationally, but it could affect some people.
Yeah, I'm not quite, from reading the consultation paper, it's not quite clear and I did write it as part of the submission, is we need to actually understand what it means in our region. And I don't think we have got a very good handle on what could happen in our region. You know, are we going to lose some farms, or how many farms are we going to lose? What's the
Sorry,
effect of that?
Luca.
We're not
Could
quite
you just
clear.
bring the mic closer? I'm struggling to hear. Just bring it closer to you.
I was just saying that that's one of the points, one of the 3 points to be made in the submission, is that we need to better understand in detail what the impact of that proposal is on our region, because there will be an impact, but it wasn't clear enough to me.
Yeah, I wonder if, and I actually know one of the founders of Groundswells personally, how they work that out might be interesting. So I'm happy to contact them.
Yeah,
and see how they did work out that figure and if it's got any correlation to applying to our district.
That's right. I've seen several different models from several consultants running numbers through farming systems to try and estimate the effects, but you know, every model is different. So it would be interesting to know what Groundswell has used.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll see if I can find it out, because that's got to go tomorrow, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Both of them do. So yeah, I think Mayor King indicated he'd just like to have a chance to have a look at our submissions before it's sent, and perhaps someone, whether it's Brad or Mertha, have a chat to him and I. So thank you.
It's the end of your random list. Yep. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And I think we certainly want to be grounded in facts, don't we, around the reality of impacts in Tasman. And yep. Anything further? Councillor Mackenzie, yes, I do have you here.
Thank you through the chair. In paragraph 8 around the essential freshwater reforms, it's fantastic. We're getting the 1.5 million over 3 years, support the appointment of a catchment management coordinator and 2 other FTEs. I guess when I read that, I was pondering a lot of progress that's being made by some of the catchment groups currently, the Murray catchment group, the Motorway catchment group, et cetera, a huge amount of effort being put in by volunteers. Some of this work is being coordinated through the Tasman Environment Trust, that in actual fact, you know, the council was one of the founding members of it. So my question is, if we spend all the money that we've been allocated of 1.5 million on employing 3 more people, does that give us our best leverage of all of that amazing volunteer effort?
Through the chair, if I could just have a few brief comments and then ask Merca perhaps to give us a little bit more of a rounded picture around it. But this money is, well, we're getting some, so is Nelson, so Iwi's getting considerably more. So is West Coast. So are some of the NGOs. So we are looking at the full package and how this would best benefit our region and the catchments that we have within it, which we're currently looking to define and get approval for, and how that might then also fit across the Nelson Tasman concept in terms of the joined up plan, and also how we might connect to the West Coast in terms of the catchment that starts in Tasman, which ends on the West Coast, how all this resource and funding might come together to give us the biggest regional value for this money together. And Merck is leading the staff collective behind this to figure out what is the best way of doing that, and have suggested that in the new year we might actually be able to bring that forward and actually have a wider discussion with the council to check to see that, you know, that you're satisfied with that we've done as much integration with all those different interests as possible, so that we're getting as big a bang for buck. It's just that we've got to draw down on that money now. So we've got some pressure to get it, but actually we're looking at a bigger picture to see how we can get the best value for the region and our ratepayers. But Merca has a much more detail than me.
Just maybe expand my question a little bit. I mean, certainly what I've heard about great work being done on the land, on private land, for example. Sometimes there's a bit of resistance when it might be TDC being the Uber organisation or DOC being the Uber organisation, when in actual fact there's so much willingness from individuals who sometimes might respond in a better way to a non-TDC or non-DOC organisation. I think Merca will probably understand what I'm really getting at. And so I'm just really wanting to make sure that we understand that and that we can get the best leverage as possible and achieve the most with the money.
Just in response, so there's a package by MOV that's come up with funding for a whole lot of reasons. And the 1.5 million that we got are specifically for FTEs, for catchment policy implementation and delivery. And there's, I haven't got it in front of me now, but there's the list of the purpose of those FTEs. So we have to spend them on the FTEs. The money is not there to work on a GIS platform or to give to another community organisation. I do know that the Landcare Trust is getting some money as well in our region. So is the Mountain to Sea Trust. There's about 24 million for iwi across the country. So I think Tasman iwi will get some too. So this is just the FTEs that we are getting is one part of a whole package that MSE is rolling out. As Kim already said, I think I'll be really keen in the new year to run the councils through a workshop of what we actually mean when we say catchment policy implementation, because under the Essential Freshwater Package, we have to roll out the freshwater farm plans, which is the tool that is being used in the package to manage catchments. And in order to effectively get us to 2024, when we're meant to be rolling out the process, and then do it successfully with our landowners, it's a huge amount of work in those 4 positions. So they're a minimum to have to actually get us to the point. Otherwise, we're not going to meet obligations. But I feel that's a whole workshop in itself. Yeah.
Thank you. Very nicely outlined. Yeah. Any other questions or comments on the group manager's report? Yes, Councillor Maru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just through the chair, I just want to acknowledge 6.1 and 6.5, I think, in terms of the regulatory staff and the assault and the attacks, in terms of it's just not okay. They should be able to come to work safe. So from the council, on behalf of council, I'd just like to acknowledge them. The danger they put themselves into the work that we ask them to do, and certainly that sort of behaviour from our community should be frowned on. So pleased to see that there was a prosecution in one case there.
Thank you. I certainly had it on my list of comments to make, and it's a pretty terrible situation, isn't it, when you rock up to work and are assaulted. It's dreadful. Is somebody willing to move the report, which includes the resolution around the submissions? Councillor Mailing, and have we got a seconder?
I'm happy with the second on the proviso that if someone just chats to the mayor about the two submissions offline. That was just
idea of giving us that, utilising that 24 hours post this.
so thank you.
Okay, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you, Kim. And we go to the annual biosecurity report. Welcome, Gwyneth.
Thank you. Oh, good morning. So I'm Gwyneth Coleman. I'm the team leader for biosecurity biodiversity, for those who haven't met me. I'm going to take the report as read, and if you don't mind, I'll take a moment to introduce the team. So biosecurity team behind me, so Ken, Lindsay, Mitch and Briar. So this is our biosecurity team that covers Tasman. We also work alongside Nelson City Council, so we have a joint regional pest management plan with them. So yeah, we're a pretty little team in the biosecurity space. You compare us to somewhere like Wellington with over 50 biosecurity officers. Auckland has over 100. So yeah, keep that in mind when you're thinking about the work that we can deliver here.
Doesn't sound quite right, weight for age, does it? Given our geographical area, how many thousand square kilometres you've got each is pretty daunting, I would think.
Yeah, so we try and prioritise our work pretty carefully, and so we deliver under our regional pest management plan. So the plan has is either exclusion, eradication, site-led programs, progressive containment, or sustained control. And so depending on what program it sits under is how we act and how seriously we take that pest. And we, as I said, we are joint with Nelson City Council, so we work really, really closely with them. We also work really closely with Marlborough District Council. They're also little and yeah, cover a large area, so we're all the sort of similar councils. And we also have in the marine space a Top of the South Marine Biosecurity Partnership, which is across the 3 councils, and it also includes iwi and MPI and industry, so agriculture particularly, and that's to really leverage that large marine space and work together in there. So some highlights of our biosecurity report, which we'd like to point out. So our Asian knotweed program is going really, really well. We've been, so this is an eradication program, which means every last one needs to go. And we've been really, really happy with that program. The same with Sabella, which is a marine pest. We are due any day now to dive Tarakohi again. So we are doing a full survey. If that comes back clear, we will have officially eradicated Sabella from Tasman District, which will be really good. Sabella comes in through boats largely from Auckland, but Canterbury as well also has a large Sabella population, which comes up on boats. So we dive through the summer to check those boats and make sure they're not bringing those in. We usually pick up 1 or 2 a year. Last summer we had 1 with Sabella come from Auckland, and that is a summer survey. It runs through, and you will receive an invite if you'd like to come and join a day on the boat and see what the divers are doing, talk to boaties. We talk to about 70 to 100 boats a day, so it's a good chance to have some conversations with people, and we only go out in the sun, so it's always really nice. Yes. Yeah, we try and yeah, it's in Tasman Bay. It's usually nice and calm. And a number of our exclusion pest programs going really, really well. Other than a potential rook incursion, which we don't think actually was a rook, but could have been. Other than that, our exclusion pest programs going really, really well. And some challenges, some of you would have already come across the odd Taiwan cherry complaint. Taiwan cherry is an eradication program. It is can be a particularly sensitive topic for some landowners who are quite
attached to their trees. But it is really important that we eradicate those trees. The Taiwan cherry has a potential to just spread right through native bush. It'll just take over the place. So we're really committed to removing those trees. We've had a bit of an increase in boundary control issues. We have boundary control pests, particularly around gorse, but other species as well. And we typically end up in the middle of neighbour disputes often, and that can take up a lot of our time. And also the pest fish program, which is run by DOC. They largely deliver that program with our support. And they have done a feasibility study on Gambusia. So Gambusia is a little fish about this big, very aggressive little fish, and it lives in some of our creeks just in the Tasman Bay and nowhere else in the South Island. So we have that on our eradication list. DOC think that it's not possible to eradicate with our current techniques. So we're currently in a bit of a discussion around how we're going to tackle that, because if we don't do it, Gambusia will spread, and it will spread to the rest of South Island, and we don't particularly want to be giving that gift to the rest of South Island. And for our operational plan, particularly this year, will be focused on a bit of a review of our RPMP this year. So there's some species that have popped up in the last 2 or 3 years that we're keen to either change the rules or include them into our plan. So the key ones for that is wilding pines, blue passion flower, water celery, Vietnamese parsley, our Sabella rules, so including looking at expanding that to look at fouling of boats so that we cover all pests, not just one particular pest, and expanding potentially the climbing asparagus rules. They are not limited to that. So we have a joint committee that I think has already been set up where we can review the plan. We're not opening the entire plan up for review because that would be a huge amount of work. We just have specific pests that we'd like to look at. And one amendment that we would like to pass here today is just changing the species of koi carp on the list. So it's a pretty simple change. Basically, scientists have always thought that we had one species. Genetic testing has told us that it's actually another species. And for order for us to keep the rules under our plan and under the Biosecurity Act, we need to recognise the right species. So it's just a simple change. Yeah, thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your report. Yeah. Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Bryant.
Thanks for your report. Great to read through the success that you're having and the plan, and that's all good. You mentioned the Taiwan cherry situation, and so I know someone who does people's gardens, and the homeowner said, well, you can tell that councillor friend of yours that TDC are never going to get onto my property to take out my tree. So there clearly are, going to be some challenges there. And I'm sort of thinking to myself, what are the barriers for people to overcome in terms of that if we're going for eradication? And I did just wonder, so, okay, we give them $75 so that they can go out and buy a native tree. And I thought, oh, well, mate, of course, we'd all like them to plant a native tree, but why are we so insistent that it is a native tree? Because if someone's done a landscaped garden, maybe we should just let them choose what they want to plant.
We do. Yeah. Yeah.
We
do encourage people to, obviously we would prefer native trees. But yes, if someone can pick a non-weedy tree replacement, then we'll accept that too. We're trying to be as kind as possible. We recognise that in some cases we're replacing big feature trees, and yeah, in our eyes, the tree is, it's another pest tree, but we appreciate that it's someone's garden pride and joy. And so, yes, sometimes we will accept that they would put a non-native tree in there.
Okay, all right. Well, I just wondered whether, that was a barrier, but good to see that you're flexible, I think. I'm not sure whether Councillor Bryant replaced his with a native or we won't go there.
I'll have to go and look, actually.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I'll talk about Taiwan, Chair, as we've got one of the challenging people in my ward, at least one that we're with. But anyway, Jenny, thank you for the report, and thank you to the team behind you that do all the work, both here in the office and out in the field. I think it's a real credit to the team that we have the gorse and broom exclusion area at the lake. Having driven around a fair proportion of the South Island last year, this time of year you really do notice the broom, and it's incredible that we've managed to keep that area free of it. So and I know one day I rang Lindsay up, and he was up on a skid side on a Friday afternoon, grubbing out gorse or that is potentially coming on a log truck. So I thought that's real commitment to the job. And I said to him, you better go home and have a beer after that. And he said, I am. So I think it's something that we should actually celebrate more, is that, because that's pretty unique now to have something like that. So really appreciate the work that you all do and the whole team does. I just have one question in relation to the report. Chilean needlegrass continues to be a bit of a challenge. Are we managing to get that on top, or any proposed changes around its status at this stage in relation to exclusion or eradication?
I'm going to pass to an expert.
What made me think about this, one of our staff members was telling me that they were on the property where it first come into New Zealand and settled, and it actually come in sheep's wool, and that's how we got it. So it's, you better come up to the microphone, Lindsay.
Won't be able to hear you. I said not using mine. Yeah. Thank you.
I suggest that putting it in as an exclusion. Right. Okay, gotcha. Technology. So yeah, I would suggest that it should go in as an exclusion species. That's a very good suggestion because it's in the Wairau Valley. It's about as far as Wairau settlement, but it's well established around the sort of between Blenheim and Seddon. So it is a real concern. So yeah, it's a good point.
We have a road and a lot of valleys making you aware of that this is actually a needlegrass area for the likes of contractors, because as I understand, it spreads really easily on mowers and the likes. Yes, so I guess we're continuing to follow up with our roading contractors as well about trying to stop the spread.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
that's appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Through the chair, I'd like to also reiterate Councillor Bryant's comments. I'd like to take a little bit further and say well done to the team getting under budget. That really is huge, and from my perspective, big pat on the back. Thank you so much.
Anything further? Councillor Mayling?
Just a comment about the biosecurity and going out with the harbour master. I had a day with them last year, and Peter Lawless, I think, is the contractor, and it's a joint thing between the three councils on the top of the south. And for a little bit of money, we get an awful lot of bang for our buck. And it's amazing the relationship that our harbour master has built up with the people that he deals with. And you do get some stroppy boat owners. I think we only had one that day I was with him, but he managed to convince them that it was the appropriate thing to do. But when you see the boats that come from all over the country that end up in the Tasman Bay and in Golden Bay, it's just amazing. So we're certainly at risk, and that program is really, really important going forward. And it's a worthwhile day, but it's not always flat. It wasn't flat to start with when we were.
Thank you.
And look, I'm happy to move the report.
Oh, thank you.
And I also like to comment on the biodiversity work that your team does as well, and attending that workshop the other day. The work that we get out of the volunteers around our whole district, you know, we couldn't pay 1% of that. It's just fantastic, and they are just such dedicated people and do a tremendous job. And going forward, that's really, really important. And it's the staff that build those relationships, and councillors, but particularly the staff. And I see that being really important, and it's hugely valuable to us. We need to do more in the Dock estate, but I just see real value of that work.
Thank you. Do you think if anyone in Golden Bay that saw a magpie would know the magpie shouldn't be there and to give you a call?
I would hope so. But and I know Ken does a lot of work around this, making sure, and there's key landowners, particularly on the Tākeka Hill side, that are very active, and so they're the ones that are really holding that line. But it is interesting in the process of our biodiversity working at, when you mention these sorts of programs that are going on in Golden Bay, some people suddenly have a light bulb moment and say, oh, I never actually realised there was no magpies here or rabbits.
Yeah.
So that's it is an education thing, and the last couple of years we've been a little bit restricted on that because of COVID. We are about to go to all of our local AMP shows and start up all of that education again. So you'll see us much more actively out talking to people about those specific roles, particularly.
Great. And I was thinking about the good news stories in here. How well do we do as a council in informing our district around what this area of work generally? So what's going well, what's been achieved, this is great, and actually here the areas of concern, and this is the ways you can help. Do you feel like that we attend to that as well as we could? I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's always more you can do, always. And so that's why you'll see work, for example, what Mirka was talking about around having catchment coordinators, working really closely with other groups like DOC and for Tasman Environment Trust, getting out articles into our news lines and into the newspapers. All of those work together. But because we are a little team and we are not media experts, and so we rely on other channels to spread that message and to use our wider team to always spread that message. So while the biosecurity team is quite small, the EI team is all out there. They all understand the biosecurity rules. We have our parks teams, all of those. Yeah, there's always more to do, and we're always happy to take suggestions about how to reach others. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's we make pretty good Facebook posts and we have media releases sometimes, but I just imagine there'd be, be quite a lot of interest. I think actually, if I think about home in Golden Bay, there's some people there very alert to this area of work and they contribute to it, but there'll be a bunch of people that wouldn't have a clue, I think, about all the work that goes in and the areas that are being successful. And anyway, I think we should be front-footing that, which might be a conversation with comms somewhere. Councillor Butler, and you might be happy to second.
I am happy to second. And I'd just like to say that I'd like to agree with Councillor Mackenzie about the value of volunteer people, and I'd just like to make a little comment or ask for a comment about the Tākeka Hill Biodiversity Group, which sits between really two areas, Motueka and Golden Bay, and it doesn't often get identified as its own area, and that group, voluntary group, has achieved a lot, and anyone who drives over the Tākeka Hill will see all the dead pine trees that they also have an extensive trapping program. So I think they're a really good example of a voluntary group which has managed to leverage funding from council as well as other organisations and carry out an effective program, and that they are a discrete environment.
Absolutely agree. Thank you. Yeah, we have, they are an exceptional group, and they are not the only ones. It's amazing through the biodiversity work that we've been doing, how many of those groups have popped up that we don't know about. We do work directly with the likes of Takaka Hill, Project Divine, Tasman Environment Trust. There are a lot of groups out there that would we would love to work with, but yeah, we will slowly build that up. Yes, they're often coming and looking for money, of course, and we can't always help with that, but we can help with our expertise and our ability to coordinate and to recognise their work. Yeah.
Thank you. Working with Divine, does that go well?
Very well.
They
are an exceptionally good value for money for our work. So we do fund, so that went through the annual plan last year to increase the funding that we give them as it's basically administration support, and they run a huge program in Golden Bay and are now coming over this side of the hill as well. They're a great group to work with, really responsive, and yeah, work very closely with them.
Yes, I've known that, and I certainly appreciate what they've done and what they've grown out of. Actually, a little office, a few people, and yeah, very functional. So I just wanted to check in about how that goes with us. So that's great to hear. Thank you. Thank you all for your work. It's just so valuable, and we know that you're working really hard, and the reports are really gratifying to read. Our resolution is that we're receiving the report. We're receiving the report on the operational plan. We're going to approve their plan, and we're going to do something with the koika names. We've had a mover and we've got a seconder. So I'm going to put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
We've got 2 items left. So temporary road closures for Westland Car Club Rally, Christmas Parade, and the Richmond Market Day. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, afternoon, councillors. I'd like to take the report as read. I'll just clarify, though, in clause 4.5. In clause 4.5, we mentioned the Nelson Car Club. That should, in fact, be the Westland Car Club. The confusion arose because the Westland Car Club applied on behalf of the Nelson Car Club. But let's just keep it simple. So as the applicant, the Westland Car Club are responsible, I guess, in terms of the terms and conditions of their road closure application. So happy to take questions.
Councillor Dowler and then Councillor Bryan.
Just happy to move.
Thank you.
My question, Madam Chair,
yes.
Just for you. Do you have something else?
No.
Jamie, just noticed there was one objection to the Taki closure. Were you able to resolve that, or was it of a nature that couldn't be resolved, or is it just, I don't think we saw the objection.
Through Madam Chair, the nature of the objection was mainly around the concerns that the condition of the road is poor after previous rallies. There's been rallies here each year. So the resolution is really just making sure we enforce the conditions of the permit if it's approved. So we do pre and post inspections, and if there's any damage, then we charge the cost of repairs back to the applicant.
Right. Is that a change from previously?
No, that's been our standard practice for many years. But given the feedback, we'll make sure we look carefully.
Thank you. And indeed, I know there's a number of spin-offs around that rally, and as you say, it's been held for a number of years. Previously, I've raised the issue of milk tankers, but that's covered in the report. They'll be cleared between runs. So thank you for that, and I'm happy to support.
Second.
And a second if needed.
Oh. Thank you, councillor Butler.
Thank you. Yeah, so I am happy to support this, but I think the point that I've raised earlier is that there isn't an acknowledgement of the issue of climate change and emissions in the report. And so I think that the community would be looking for a discussion at least, or to have something contained in the report or an acknowledgement that, you know, that in the situation we are in now of climate change and trying to bring our climate change policy or plans more central to council work, that that be acknowledged in the report. So I just would, you know, like to have I know that the report author's not here, which is a bit awkward. Yeah.
I'm happy to talk about that a little bit. I mean, there's a de minimis sort of aspect to this, in that the significance of the rally event probably doesn't really have any measurable effect on the council's climate goals, and that's, so I guess the question is how much time and effort goes into kind of preparing an assessment of the emissions in regards to a decision like this. I know the council has some wider work going on around climate change and its climate action plan. And there's similarly more wider work going on around the government's targets for reducing transport emissions coming through activity on our roads. But I guess until that sort of becomes more clear, it's difficult for us to make a real assessment.
Right. I don't think what I'd be looking for, or what if I was a member of the community, what I would be wanting to see was just an acknowledgement that you know, that it has been considered, if you know what I mean. Otherwise, it appears from the report that it has not been considered. That's all, you know, would be the only point I would make.
Thank you. Anything further? Councillor Walker.
Through you, Madam Chair, I wonder if there's an appetite that we could pass this resolution in stages, because I certainly don't endorse the car club rally. However, I do endorse resolution number 3 and number 4.
We've got a mover and a seconder for the complete resolution. So I
do what you feel fit. Guide them through one by one if you want. I don't mind.
As a whole, but if the movers are happy with it, I'll go with the flow.
Okay. If we're to go with this, then you might move 1 and 2. Or it can be put as a whole, given that's what you moved. It's up to you, really. And then we'd put it as a whole. Okay. Yeah, I've got a comment to make yet, so there might be others before we put it. So I've had a bit of contact from people in our community at home, but also in wider district around car rallies generally. And there's an instinctive, I think, response around there must be big emitters, and what's council's policy and how on earth can we be supporting car rallies. So there has been that certainly has been communicated to me, and I've had a bit of a dusting from some people around how I supported the Targa rally, and I'm not going to vote for you because you did that, which is their right, of course. But I think that I suppose I just want to say this, that we don't as a council have a policy or a process or some system whereby we assess any events, all events around their emissions, and how people who are running the events, whatever they are, there's an AMP show or a Santa parade that might help generate consumerism and fill our landfills. I'm only saying that because media aren't here, I think. But you know, so we end up in this default position a bit around us making decisions on road closures from a moral position. You know, that's what I've been aware of, and actually we don't have a policy around that. We haven't made a decision that we're going to assess all the events that happen, whether that's the classic boat thing up the lake or AMP show with everyone travelling to that, or could just list a whole bunch of them, couldn't we? So, but it is something that some of us have received that response from people around. Instinctively, it must be that car rallies are high emitters and we should just have a position of not supporting them at all. That's not the case, and I appreciate your comments. I think an email, Jamie, I think that some of us saw perhaps around relativity in terms of emissions, say for this event compared to car movements in a day probably in the district. So I think this is a bit of therapy for me. So it's just good to be able to say that out loud. But right of reply, Councillor Dowler. I know, I think, oh yes, Councillor Ellis, you do.
Sorry, can I just ask a question that I possibly could have asked earlier, but it's really only occurred to me. And on the same vein of just acknowledging the climate issues, I also noticed that there's no acknowledgement of where iwi stand and where that role sits and fits with these issues. Could you?
You through, Mr. Chair. I guess under section 9 of our reports, as we consider related to management. So the fourth row of the table in that section talks about whether the activity contributes or detracts. And in this table somewhere there was also that he would, oh yes, sorry, yeah. So yeah, it's considered, I guess, and some of these are quite mechanical type decisions with very low impact. So that's where we assess the significance. And if it were a significant decision, we would talk about that certainly a lot more, or a significant issue, we would talk about it a lot more. Yep.
Thank you. So I've got to get a head around of where we see it's a significant or where it's not a significant issue for iwi, that's all. So thank you.
Any further comments or questions? Right of reply, Councillor Dowler.
Thank you. So, yeah, I do have a little bit of emissions and different events do different things. every day I can stand at my new house and watch 14 milk tankers go past from Temuka to Golden Bay and back to Temuka again. In the fruit season coming up in January, February, and May, it's probably going to be 5,000 truck movements down the highway as well. So one day of rally is going to put emissions into the air, but just absolutely minuscule to what the day-to-day stuff goes past the highway at the present time. I'm a member of an organisation called the New Zealand Association for the South Island. We met with the Minister of Transport about 8 months ago. Fuels available overseas that could be imported into New Zealand. So the grade 2 biofuel, the grade 1 biofuel that's available to run in the modern cars used in older vehicles. It melts the rubber and kills the fuel hose and all sorts of stuff that the older vehicles run. So our Hot Rod Association asked the minister to look at bringing in this biofuel from Hong Kong in the next couple of 3 years, so that all the older cars, which involves rally cars and vintage cars and all sorts of stuff, could start using this fuel, which would reduce the emissions out of those vehicles by over 60%. The minister turned around and said to our president, he said, "Not my problem, it's the fuel company's problem. You want that fuel, go and talk to them." Then just prior to Christmas, he turned around and did a bit of a rollover and says, "Well, hang on a minute, this biofuel was a good thing. I think we need to get it into the country." And now just the other day, they've walked away again and given them another couple of years to bring it in there. So I run 2 V8s. I've done probably 300 miles in 2 years. Just recently, the price of fuel starting to kill it. But I just don't believe that I should be out there every weekend running around burning amounts of fuel. That's just me. But I will still use them. Once the biofuel comes available, I'll use them a lot more. You'll see me parking it out all day. But things are happening, and these rally guys will use this biofuel as soon as it's available. So going was being think don't do it now because it's of the emissions. I think there's a lot of other stuff that we've got to be looking at that's happening that we've got no control over. All these diesel trucks, the older diesel trucks, will go into this biofuel as well. It is available for them. So let's just watch the space in 2 or 3 years' time. Hopefully it happens. Also, hydrogen should be coming available up about then. We've got one hot rod in the country running on hydrogen at the moment. He's making his own under the bonnet. And it went very well. It just did a trip from Bluff to Cape Reinga, and it goes very well. He bought a kit from the States and put it on the vehicle. Probably totally illegal at this stage, but he did it to prove a point. That's mine. Thank you.
Thank you for your right of reply. I'm going to put the resolution as it is in the report. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Against, and can I have it recorded, please, that I'm against for the car rally, not the Christmas parades in the other market? Thanks.
Yeah, I think might get tricky around it's a resolution. And it's hot, yeah. Anyway, it can be noted that you've against. Thank you. And finally, we've got the last matter on our agenda, temporary restriction of heavy vehicles, Korere, Top House Road. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll take this as read. Hopefully it's self-explanatory enough, and I'm happy to take questions.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to move, firstly. And now I do just have a question for Jamie. Jamie, I understand the reason for this, and we've all pretty much been aware of the issue with the closure of State Highway 6. But I assume it's historically that our seal's probably been lighter than the state highways. Is that something we should look at in the future, that we seal to a higher standard for these type of situations? Because like we've had the State Highway 1 diversion, and that was using all state highway ones. But it's quite conceivable this could happen again in the future. And I imagine there'd be quite a significant cost. I'm morphing into something else, but I did see it just recently where what the state highway pays on their section per kilometre is vastly different to what we spend on our network per kilometre. And I guess as is, or both are probably an average, but is there some key routes we should look to spend more money at the time we do upgrade them is I guess the question.
Thank you, through your chair. It's a great question. And this is really at the heart of kind of how we manage our roads. You're right in the sense that it would be very, very expensive to bring even just Karere Top House Road up to a standard that would be able to withstand, 500 or 600 trucks a day. We haven't calculated it. That route's 20 something kilometres long. So you'd be talking about at least $1 million a kilometre to strengthen it. So it's very, very significant. We have quite a small program of pavement strengthening that we do. We're doing one on Stock Road at the moment. And we do those as they're needed, basically, as it becomes uneconomic to repair that bit of road and you have to re-strengthen it. But I mean, we spread our butter very thin across our road network, and the state highways, on the other hand, have quite an order of magnitude more money to spend on their highways, and they need it because there's even with the extra money and extra strength they have, they are really suffering. So what we do have is we've got identified key freight routes, for example, Lower Queen Street, where we know the network has to carry freight because of where things are located. But I would be very cautious about wanting to open up more of our network to that level of traffic and to encourage it. I just don't think that ratepayers can afford it.
Yeah, that'll do.
That'll do. Thank you.
I could ask a whole lot more.
Yeah.
There's no need.
Yeah. Councillor Mayling and Councillor Dowler.
Well, I'm happy to second this, and I think they took a very practical decision in terms of restricting this. I think back to the Kaikoura earthquakes and the amount of money NZTA or Waikakotahi had to spend on the Lewis Pass when it suddenly went from a few trucks to a massive number of trucks. And they basically had to work on that road every day for those 2 years. And they've certainly improved that road now. It's much more resilient. There's more passing days. But this is a 7-week closure. It was an extra 25 minutes for those heavy trucks to go the longer way. I think it just makes sense. And I thank our staff for making that decision. And I know they had to put up with some abuse from some of these truck owners, and that's unacceptable. It really is. And they shouldn't have had to put up with that because you only had to be logical to see that they were going to destroy that road and the cost to the ratepayers was going to be horrendous. So it had to be made. So I'm very supportive and happy to second it. And it's just an example of the fact that the type of roads we've got in our district and the resilience around our main roads. We just have problems. You get a weather event, that part of State Highway 6 had not been upgraded significantly where we had the problems compared to the other side. So, that's why. And it showed it on TV3 News last night that I saw the amount of work that they're having to do, and they're struggling in terms of timing because they've had to go down further, and some of the rock on that State Highway 6 has been worse than they thought. So I hope they can keep to their 7 weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Dowler, and then Councillor Walker, and then Councillor Kinnemans.
I'd actually like to congratulate the staff on the action that you took so quickly. Being an ex-heavy vehicle inspector, it's not just the road surface, it's actually the pressure wave that comes from the truck. And it can vary between 0.5 metre and 1 metre below the ground. And that's where the structure starts to fall apart. I was involved with the game when we went from 39 tonne to 44 tonne, and we were taken into a room and it was all explained to us the different effects the heavier trucks were going to have. And now we've gone to 60 tonne. It's amazing how the roads are going to probably fall apart. Unfortunately, we're going to have to live with it and deal with it, or ban the trucks off certain roads.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, through Madam Chair. I was going to second it, but that Councillor Mayling beat me to that. I just want to acknowledge the staff here, but also that Waka Kotahi have put on 2 shifts now to try and make sure it stays within the 7-week time frame. And I think we need to acknowledge that because, you know, from what I hear from around the Tasman area, that the impact of vehicles not coming to us will have a significant effect over the Christmas period. So the sooner we can get that road going, the better. So thank you, Waka Kotahi.
Good, thank you. Councillor Kindermoms.
I'd also, through the chair, I'd also like to thank your staff and your team for what you've done. And also congratulate you for having the gumption to get out there and say, this is an issue. We're going to address it now and retrospectively seek permission, because that shows a lot of courage for your staff, and also commitment that doesn't always come out in a larger organisation. So well done, team. Thank you.
Anything further? Mr. Kirby, morning. Afternoon.
Can I just pick up on the what staff have been subjected through this? I'm working with Jamie. We're wanting to see if we can call this out. We want to get the customer service requests and perhaps write letters to these people that have written to us or contacted our staff and ask for an apology, because I think some of the way the staff have been treated and sworn at. And can I say that I think there's some gender thing in this, some bullying, and I think it needs to be called out. I've spoken to the staff concerned and they don't want to go any further, but I think as a manager, we need to do what we can to protect our staff in situations like this. There's a genuine reason why we had to do what we did, and being subjected to emotional abuse like they were is not acceptable, and I think we should be calling it out.
Well, I'd certainly support that, and I imagine that there'd be support around our table here. And there's a point, isn't there, where as a manager or whoever in the leadership role just needs to address that, regardless of whether people want to see, make a complaint for themselves. So, yeah, that's really disappointing to hear, of course. Yeah, if you could pass on our concern to those that have been affected in that way within staff. We haven't got media here today, but it's I don't know how we get something like that put out into the community that it's just unacceptable, even that it's happened, that people come under pressure that way. In terms of the process, so making contact around, can we just do this now and retrospectively address it here? Thank you. And thank you to councillors that responded saying, yep, we'll do that. So that seemed like a good process. There's nothing further. We've moved by Councillor Bryant and seconded by Councillor Mailing. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Jamie, Richard and your teams. That brings us to the end of the meeting. Is there anything further that I've not attended to? That's us. So thank you for your input and your contribution, and to all those staff that have been involved here today with us. Kim's going to close for us with karakia. Thank you.
Kia ora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana, aroha atu, aroha mai, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Good. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Could I just remind everyone there's a full council meeting at 1:30.
Yes, 7, eh?
We need